Gerai, žiūrim video apie Khashoggi.
He might be wealthy beyond belief and lead a life of extreme privilege, but in reality, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, is a ruthless thug who places no value on the lives of those who question him. Now, ordinarily, uttering an insult like that would be enough to cause an international incident, but it's exactly what the CIA found following a top-secret investigation into the death of Jamal Khashoggi. The recently declassified report is damning, saying the outspoken journalist was assassinated and his body dismembered at the Saudi consulate in Istanbul in an operation ordered by bin Salman. It's savagery that's stunned the world.
Yep.
You're watching the last moments of Jamal Khashoggi's life, entering the Saudi consulate in Istanbul.
He arrived in the room at 1:15. By 1:35, he was already dead. So it all happened so quickly and his life was taken so fast.
Laying in wait inside was a Saudi hit squad. They don't know it, but the building has been bugged by intelligence
Yo, it gets fucking wild, šita istorija. Nu nafig.
agencies. The brutal murder caught on tape.
Is it possible to put the body in a bag? No, too heavy, very tall. I know how to cut very well. I have never worked on a warm body though, but I'll also manage that easily. I normally put on my headphones and listen to music. I sip on my coffee and smoke.
The methodology of the murder is almost medieval.
Yeah, people would say Saudi Arabia is still a medieval place.
After years denying involvement,
Did you order the murder of Jamal Khashoggi?
Absolutely not.
now explosive secret documents point the finger of blame directly at a friend of Australia, Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman.
There is no way an operation of this nature could be conducted without the Crown Prince being informed, involved, and indeed commissioning the operation.
Mr. Jamal Khashoggi, welcome to the program.
Jamal Khashoggi was a respected journalist and said what many were too scared to say about Saudi Arabia's powerful Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, also known as MBS.
He is creating an environment of intimidation and fear. Saudis are being silenced.
Critics of Saudi Arabia's regime are not tolerated, so Khashoggi fled to the US in 2017, where he continued to write critical articles in the Washington Post that drew the ire of Saudi Arabia's de facto ruler. It made Khashoggi a marked man.
جمال خشتي الصحافة العربية تحقق صوابها غش وتحديد عايزين احمي دمك مين لا يخرج من فخ
Jamal was a gamekeeper turned poacher.
Journalist Jonathan Rugman has written a book investigating Khashoggi's demise.
And here is this irritating Saudi figure in the heart of American power, writing these columns in the Washington Post, criticizing what is going on in Saudi Arabia. And the Crown Prince is extremely thin-skinned. He simply couldn't cope with the criticism.
Despite the threat, Jamal felt safe in the ancient city of Istanbul on the banks of the Bosphorus. He'd even found love here with Hadice Cengiz, who he was about to marry. Jamal was going to be your husband. What did you love about him?
We both felt we understood each other really well. Jamal had given me the feelings of peace and happiness.
Unlucky.
October 2, 2018, Jamal had an appointment with the Saudi consulate in Istanbul to pick up a document for his wedding to fiancée Hadice. She went with him on the day and is seen waiting once he goes inside. It's quite haunting to look back now at those pictures of you waiting outside the consulate. Can you just take us through what was going through your mind then as the hours went by and still Jamal hadn't emerged?
The only thing I remember about that day is that I was really waiting there with big hopes. Nobody waits somewhere thinking that something bad is going to happen to them.
What the couple didn't know was a group of assassins had been dispatched from Saudi Arabia to meet Jamal, including a forensic pathologist skilled in dismembering corpses.
An hour before Jamal enters the consulate, there is a recording, a chilling recording.
Agnes Kalamard is the United Nations Special Rapporteur investigating the journalist's execution.
Is it possible to put the body in a bag? No. Too heavy.
This is a translation of the tapes she's listened to from inside the consulate, capturing a conversation between a forensic pathologist and the head of the operation.
After I dismember it, you will wrap the parts into plastic bags, put them in suitcases and take them out.
That Saudi forensic pathologist actually studied right here in Australia for 3 months at the Victorian Institute for Forensic Medicine.
The doctor is explaining that he's not used to cut bodies on the floor. That if they cut the body into several smaller pieces, then it can go into some of the bags. That cutting skin may be a bit more difficult. All of that conversation is heard before Jamal Khashoggi enters the consulate, and then that conversation ends asking whether the sacrificial animal has arrived.
So they call Jamal a sacrificial animal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The death squad was about to carry out its orders under the portrait of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman.
It is met by individuals who have tools to kill him. They have injections, they probably have a saw, they have ropes, they have everything that they needed to kill him and to dismember him.
There is a towel here. Will you have me drugged? We will put you to sleep.
And yet, what is so striking, Jamal come across as somebody so gentle, so polite, even when confronted by those killers, those bullies. He tries to negotiate with them, he tries to speak to them. However, progressively, you can hear in his voice the fears coming up and the concerns that maybe it is not going to be so easy to get out of this office.
What happened next is brutal and barbaric.
The last minute or so of the recording, when what we hear are the sound of the struggle, the sounds of people pushing people, breathing very heavily, push his head, push him there, is he asleep yet? Keep your hands there, keep your hand there, and then just the noise of the plastic. So the body is dismembered very quickly after the killing, indicating that everything was planned.
Jamal had disappeared without a trace, with his fiancée Haditha waiting outside the consulate until the early hours of the morning. What was the moment of realization for you that something terrible had happened to Jamal?
My first serious fear was when I called the consulate and obtained the information that the consulate had closed. That's when I truly thought about the possibility that something bad may have happened to him. But I still didn't think it would be something this bad, like being killed or being dissected.
Initially, the Saudis refused to acknowledge that Jamal was dead, even dressing a member of the kill squad in his clothing and getting him to walk past CCTV cameras in Istanbul to put investigators off the scent. Turkish police weren't allowed inside the consulate until 2 weeks later. Was this a cover-up from the outset from the Saudis?
Yes, I think it was a cover-up from the outset.
Jonathan, you've written and researched a book
British journalist Jonathan Rugman.
Ir kas svarbiausia, aš prisimenu, kai gyvai tas visas vyko, kai ten Reddit'e pastoviai paustino straipsnius visi rašė, prisimenu ir tą, kad kameros užfiksavo, kaip jis išeina ir viską, ir paskui po kažkiek laiko, ten gan greitai, kiek pamenu, ištyrė ten ir tuos įrašus rado ir viską ir įrodė, kad jo, jį užmušė ir susiejo nenuginčiamai su tuo MBS-u viską, MBS-u ir Amerika nieko, pasaulis nieko. Ir čia buvo viena žiauriausių ir labiausiai public tiesiog egzekucijų iš Saudo Arabijos to princo ir ką? Nieko, visiškai nieko. Padla gyvas, žurnalistas miręs, goddamn, kokia neteisybė,
Has covered the story since it first broke.
The Saudi version of events, which kept changing. First they said he had gone outside, then they said something had happened to him in a fight, then they said that there'd been a struggle and he had been killed by accident. The narrative that Saudis kept coming up with was unconvincing, not least because the killers arrived in 2 planes with diplomatic clearance. 7 of the 15 members of the hit squad were from the Crown Prince's personal security detail. The plane's ownership was in the hands of the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund controlled by the Saudi Crown Prince. So the idea that this was an unauthorized operation was complete nonsense.
Jamal's murder drew intense interest and speculation, but the Saudi palace continued to deny any involvement, despite mounting evidence to the contrary.
So clearly this is a premeditated crime. I think the evidence is there that the intention was to kill him.
But there was still nothing definitive linking the Crown Prince to the killing. That was until this year. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is a serious power broker on the world stage, seen here smiling with our Prime Minister at the G20 summit in 2019, a year after the murder of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi. A few months later, aware he was the centre of a growing international scandal, the Prince agreed to an interview on US 60 Minutes.
Did you order the murder of Jamal Khashoggi?
بلا شك لا.
Absolutely not.
The American government thinks that you ordered it. What did you think?
أعتقد في كلمات مغلوطة فيما ذكرتيه.
I believe what you mentioned is not correct. There isn't an official statement announced by the American government in this regard.
Crown Prince had formed a close relationship with President Trump, who viewed him as an essential ally in the Middle East and an asset to the US economy.
$3 billion, $533 million.
It was a relationship that was simply too valuable to jeopardize.
We've become very good friends over a fairly short period of time.
United Nations investigator Agnes Callamard says Mohammed bin Salman was untouchable as long as President Trump was in office.
Well, it certainly protected him. Let's recall that the US Congress imposed sanctions against Mohammed bin Salman and against Saudi Arabia. It demanded that the Director of National Intelligence release classified information regarding the killing of Jamal Khashoggi.
Did the CIA have a recording of MBS demanding Khashoggi's silence?
I don't want to talk about it. You have to ask them.
All of those things were vetoed by Donald Trump, and therefore prevented in many ways the working of the American democracy.
Did MBS lie to you, sir?
I don't know. You know, who can really know? But I can say this: he's got many people now that say he had no knowledge.
What if the Crown Prince, speaking to you, the President of the United States, directly lied to you about?
Well, he told me that he had nothing to do with it. He told me that, I would say, maybe 5 times.
Do you just live with it because you need him?
Well, will anybody really know? All right, will anybody really know?
Damn. Yep, too much money.
Well, it turns out we do now know. President Joe Biden's taken the highly unusual step of releasing the secret findings of the CIA investigation into the murder. And it's here in black and white. Mohammed bin Salman approved the operation to capture or kill Jamal Khashoggi.
Tas ir yra labai šudinai, blėt, čia ne pirmas taigi kartas, kur vidinės tos tarnybos, ten CIA, FBI, aš neskiriu ten tų visų, kurios, bet tipo, vis padaro tyrimus, pateikia tos įrodymus, viską ir tada prezidentai, aišku, politikai ir panašiai nusprendžia ir vieną arba kitą dalyko, nedaryti, nebaust, nes yra per daug pinigų ir kiti politiniai interesai. Ir tipo, kiek daug tų duomenų nėra paviešinta, kai kas yra tipo paviešinta ir pastoviai jau, kai praeina kokie 5-6 metai ar panašiai, kažkas paviešino ir kas iš to dabar jau žmonės primiršė, ir niekad nieko iš to nebūna. Ir va, toksai žmogžudys labai aiškiai galingas žmogus ir jam niekas gyvenime nieko nepadarys, tipo, kas jam bus. Ir ten apie Putino paskui ten dvarus išeina dokumentikos ir viskas, kiek jis ką tenais, kur ką užsakęs, nunuodimus, Navalnio ir panašiai. Ir kas iš to? Nieko. Taigi valdžioje sėdi ir šalis sankcijos uždės kažkokios, please, belin kokie bizniai, taigi negalit. Damn fucking sad. But that's how
According
the world
to
works.
the intelligence report, the Crown Prince viewed the journalist as a threat and supported using violent measures to silence him. The question now is, what punishment will one of the West's strongest allies face for such a horrible crime?
I don't think MBS can change. Of course, it's never been a democracy, Saudi Arabia, we're not going to lie, but it's never been as repressive as it is now.
Few people know the brutal reality of Mohammed bin Salman's regime better than Lina Al-Hathlul. Her sister Lou Jane is an internationally recognised human rights campaigner who was locked up for more than 1,000 days for speaking her mind.
To my far left, we have Lujane Al-Hathlul, and she became known for her challenging of the ban on women's driving.
While Lou Jane languished in a Saudi prison, Lina, exiled in Belgium, has led an international campaign for her freedom.
They would electrocute her, waterboard her. She was being flogged, beaten, spit at. They would sexually harass her, basically. And even, the electrocution, they would also try to put it in sensitive places and laugh about it.
Do you think Mohammed bin Salman is evil?
The very fact that I don't dare say anything as harsh, I think you have an answer.
Lou Jane was finally released from prison earlier this year, but remains banned from speaking about her arrest and is also barred from leaving Saudi Arabia. There are reportedly more than 30,000 political prisoners in Saudi Arabia, a sign of the Crown Prince's zero-tolerance approach to any dissent. Do you see obvious links between what happened to Jamal Khashoggi and the treatment of your sister?
Absolutely. Of course, it's the same regime, it's the same people involved, and also it's the same techniques. I mean, even the threats, just saying to Lujane that they could kill her and cut her body into pieces and throw it in the sewage system.
Hopes were high that Joe Biden would bring Mohammed bin Salman into line after talking tough on the campaign trail.
Khashoggi was in fact murdered and dismembered, and I believe in the order of the Crown Prince. And I would make it very clear, we were not going to, in fact, sell more weapons to them. We were going to, in fact, make them pay the price and make them, in fact, the pariah that they are. There's very little social redeeming value in the present government in Saudi Arabia.
But just like his predecessor, the new president has now also decided not to come down hard on the Saudis. Channel 4 reporter Jonathan Rugman says it's hard to see how the West will ever hold Mohammed bin Salman to account. Joe Biden talked a big game on the campaign trail, but by the time he's got to office, he's come to the same conclusion as Donald Trump, that better the devil you know.
The Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia was too big to fail. We all know how regime change turned out in Iraq. And so the Americans are treading a very careful line. Jamal Khashoggi was living 12 miles from the White House in Virginia. So this is extremely personal for the Americans.
The significance of Jamal Khashoggi's murder is the implicit threat to anyone who criticises Saudi Arabia. They can be killed no matter where they are in the world. What do you think happened to the body?
It is possible that Jamal's body was transported back on one of the planes that left Istanbul back to Saudi Arabia on the night of the killing. It's possible that those in Riyadh wanted proof of his murder. They wanted perhaps evidence. They wanted his fingers, perhaps. They may have wanted his head as some kind of trophy. We simply don't know. Then the Turkish police said a lot of meat was bought for a barbecue that took place in the consul's garden just after the murder took place.
Of
and
course,
the theory being that Jamal's body was mixed with this meat and incinerated at a very high temperature.
It's been about 2.5 years since his death, and the time that has passed since, there has not been a day. There hasn't been a moment in that day when I have not thought about him countless times.
Jamal Khashoggi's fiancée, Haditha, has now begun legal proceedings against Mohammed bin Salman in the United States. It's not just about seeking justice for the journalist's death, but also about trying to defend free speech for everyone in the future.
Now that the truth has come out, what are we going to do now? What is going to be done now? Will the necessary action be taken? What I want to say here is that MBS cannot run from this crime, that he shouldn't be able to run from this, and that I want justice to sooner or later prevail, and that this crime shouldn't go unpunished.